Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Okay, so don't look at the paper that's going around now. Yet, okay? No.
You know what that means. Gotta look.
Well, of course, I know, but I really don't like it. So I actually raised this issue a couple of weeks ago, but so we've got this. And this is not something that we read this morning because of the triennial cycle, but we have the sin of the golden calf, and Moses smashes the tablets, and stuff happens, and God forgives the people, so now there's got to be a second set of tablets. So God says to Moses, carve out for yourself 2 tablets, and bring them up to the top of the mountain. And if I'm Moses, I'm saying, right, I have to carve 2 tablets of stone and bring them up to the top of a mountain, which is made out of stone, right? So why can't I just climb up the mountain, maybe, with a hammer and a chisel, right? And I'll carve out the tablets up there instead of schlepping them up the mountain, which is made out of stone, right? And it's not like Moshe is reticent about challenging God, right? I mean, he does it. I mean, Abraham did it, but Moshe did it too. I mean, prior to this, right, Moses says to God, forgive this people, right? And there's kind of midrashic stuff, right? Because if you remember, at the end, right before they leave Egypt, right, they borrow from their neighbors gold, right? And then they leave, and they take it with them. And, so in Midrashim, Moshe says to God, this is your fault, right? You told them to get the gold, and they made a golden calf. And if they didn't have gold, they may have wanted to make a golden calf, but they would not have been successful, because you can't make a golden calf without gold, right? So it's your fault, right? But even in the text itself, Moshe says to God, if you won't forgive this people, Maheni na misifrecha asher katavta. Erase me from this book that you are writing. Okay, right? Because after all, Moshe controls the rights over his name, image, and likeness, right? and so he says to God, fine, God, I can't tell you what to do, but I do not agree to be a character in the Torah if you don't forgive this people, right? And can't have 5 books of Moses without Moses, right? So, okay, you got me, right? You got me. All right, I'll forgive this people because I really have no choice, because I kind of need you to be in the Torah, or it's not much of a Torah, right? But so the question is, right, what is the point of Moses having to do this himself and schlep it up the mountain? And so I found a Rashi's commentary on this, right? Because it can't just be random. There has to be a reason. And so Rashi brings in a very interesting parable, okay? And so now let's look at the text, okay? All right, you for yourself, pasal lacha, you broke the first ones, you others for yourselves, right? In other words, right? I didn't tell you to break the tablets. You broke them, right? I mean, and we do. I mean, we do. Like, you know, with kids, right? We do this. You know, or I mean, not to compare, right? But as you know, we have a dog named Rashi, and Rashi will knock his favorite toy is his flamingo ball, and Rashi will knock the flamingo ball off the bed and then look at us and stare at us and whine that we should go get the flamingo ball and put it back in the bed. And what do we say, Rashi? You knocked it off the bed, you go get it, right? What? He goes and gets it. Okay. So you broke the tablets, you replace them, you make others, right? And so here's the mashal, the parable. This can be compared to a king who went abroad and left his betrothed with the maidservants. Because of the immoral behavior of the maidservants, she acquired a bad reputation. Her bridesman is the person who appointed to defend the bride should any problems arise, right? So the bride, it's in Hebrew, it's the shushvin. The shushvin is like the agent, right? The agent for the bride, right? So he rose and he tore up her marriage contract, her ketubah, right? The bridesman, the shushvin, tore up her ketubah. And he says, if the king decides to kill her, I will say she's not yet your wife, right? Because at this era, okay, and we're talking about the rabbinic era, we're not talking about like the Torah-itic era, right? But I mean, at a Jewish wedding, right, it's actually two parts, right? There's the erusin, which is the betrothal, and the kiddushin, which is the actual marriage, and the ketubah testifies to the betrothal, okay? And it's essentially, it's this kind of weird thing where, like, you are married enough that if the woman were to stray, that would be considered adultery. But you're not married enough to live together, right? So, you know, at a certain point, like they realize, this isn't working really well, right? Right? I mean, they've signed, and then they want to like have relations, and they can't, right? So we now have them back to back, but technically they're two different ceremonies. So what's going on here, right, is that the betrothed, they have a ketubah, right? Which means if she strays, it's adultery, which means she could be put to death, right? So, but they're not fully married, right? So the shushvin tears up the ketubah and says, "What, you want to put her to death? Okay, fine. Prove that she's betrothed to you." And you can't prove that she's betrothed to you, right? Because no ketubah. The ketubah's been torn up, right? So if the king decides to kill her, I'll say she's not yet your wife. Why? Because the ketubah has been torn up. The king investigated and discovered that it was only the maidservants who were guilty of immoral behavior. right? She got a bad reputation because of her servants, but she actually was as pure as the driven snow, right? And she's not Joan Jett, so she does care about her bad reputation, right? But it's just a bad reputation, right? So he, the king, became appeased to her, right? He said, oh, all right, I misjudged her. She's fine. It's just her maidservants that, were guilty of bad behavior. So he said, yeah, I want to marry her. So the Shushvin says, well, write her another marriage contract, right? Write her another ketubah, because first one got torn up, right? Notice he doesn't say, because I tore it up, right? The first one got torn up, and the king said, you tore it up. So you go buy yourself another sheet of paper, and I will write to her with my personal handwriting, okay? And then Rashi goes on to explain who these, right? I mean, we shouldn't need that, right? Whenever you see a king parable, the king is God, right? So the king is God, and the bride is who? Israel, right? I mean, at Mount Sinai, right? It's a marriage, right? God is married to the Jewish people, right? And this metaphor, and we see this metaphor in the prophets all the time, right? Hosea in particular, but others as well, right? That Israel is the bride of God, and she has strayed, and then they become reconciled, right? So the king is God, and the bride is Israel, and the Shushvin, the bride's men is Moshe, and the immoral maidservants are the Erev Rav, the mixed multitude, right? Because the Torah says it's not only Israelites who went out of Egypt, right? But a mixed multitude went with them, right? All kinds of Egyptian non-Israelites, schleppers of one sort or another who for whatever reason went along with the Israelites. And so according to this Rashi, okay, which by the way, I mean, it seems to me is contrary to the pshat, to the actual words of the text, right? That it wasn't Israelites who built the golden calf. It was only the Erev Rav, the mixed multitude, right? So when God realized, right? So and the tablets of the Ten Commandments are the ketubah, right? So Moshe, to save Israel, the bride of God, from being subject to the death penalty for straying while betrothed, he destroys the tablets. You say you're betrothed. Show me the evidence, right? Where's the evidence? Release the files. You can't release the files. There are no files to release because you destroyed them, right? Because you destroyed them. So that's why Moshe had to carve the tablets himself, because he was the one who destroyed them. But the destroying them wasn't actually a bad thing. It was an attempt to defend and protect the Jewish people but ultimately kind of unnecessary because God realized that it wasn't the Jews who actually did this golden calf thing, it was actually the mixed multitude. Right. Thoughts on this? Yeah, Jeff.
So why does Moshe need to carve it first and then bring it up the mountain? Because the Rashi explains why he has to carve the tablets, but it doesn't explain why he has to carve them below and then bring it up, which was the original question.
Right, exactly. And I agree with you. It doesn't really answer that question. And that particular statement of like, bring them up the mountain is a couple of verses later, and Rashi has no comment on that, and I haven't found anybody else who has a comment on that. I would sort of view it like in basketball terms as a continuation, right? That's right. The carving and the schlepping is one thing, right? Obviously there's no schlepping without carving, right? Because there's no tablets to schlep if you haven't carved them, right? But apparently, like carving and it's all one thing. But I agree with you. I mean, it is certainly theoretically conceivable that Moses could have carved out 2 tablets, which he should do because he's the one who broke them, but at the top of the mountain rather than like schlepping them up. And there's so in that sense, this is only the outline of an answer and not an actual answer to my query. Yeah, Robert.
Would it be part of an answer?
Right.
You broke them, so I want you to rewrite them and bring them up to me so I can sign them, or so I can.
Right, but he didn't rewrite them. God broke them.
He reviewed them.
Right, he recorded. You're right. It is clearly a penance, right? It's clearly a penance. There's a kind of measure for measure. And Rabbi Goldman, I'll get to you in a second. I mean, there's also, even I didn't mention this before, and honestly, I wasn't saving it for now, but since you mentioned it, there is a kind of measure for measure. I mean, it's not always the case that this parashat is also Shabbat Parah, but it is often the case. And some of the commentators see that as a measure for measure too, right? In other words, it's the sin of the golden calf, so we slaughter a calf as expiation, right? Now, I would say that, and in order to do that, you also have to look at precisely what Aaron says, right? Which I see, frankly, as a massive invasion of responsibility, right? Because Aaron said, well, the people made me do it, right? People made me do it, and I told them to bring their gold, right? I did. I told them to bring their gold, and I threw the gold into the furnace. Out came this. I threw the gold in the furnace, and out came this calf. Right. And if that's the case, then the calf has agency too, and therefore, I don't know. Robert Goldman, you had something you wanted to say?
Yeah, just to add that I love that midrash interpretation, but sometimes the midrash actually considers the people of Israel as the princess, the daughter, not necessarily the wife, which also ties into what you just said, which is so beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's princess, or a different, but yeah, so you have lots of midrashim that have this king metaphor, and that's, and this idea of it being a marriage, I think is really important. And, yeah, Lloyd.
But why is Aaron responding to people that are really part of the tribe?
Well,
I mean, these people are hangers-on.
right.
They have no standing, or they shouldn't have any standing. Why is he responding to them?
No, because if you read the Midrash, he knows that it's not the betrothed who sinned, but she's getting a bad reputation, okay, because her bridesmaids have sinned, so he is trying to protect her reputation. She's going to be accused of doing something he knows that she didn't do. But it's the same thing. Look, I mean, if like, for example, very often in a criminal trial, right, and so the person flees, right, and the prosecutors will say, well, they fled, that's evidence of guilt. Not necessarily. It's evidence of knowing that I might be arrested, but sometimes I'm arrested for something I didn't do, right? So that's what Moshe is not in the Midrash, right?
I think you missed my point. It's Aaron that finally gives in to the golden calf.
Right.
Why, if the Israelites were really not part of the Mishpachah, why was there any response?
No, but because this Midrash.
No, I'm not talking about the Midrash.
No, I understand, but this Midrash does violence to the text. I don't think it's really the mixed multitude. That's what I'm saying. I think this text is trying to clear us of something of which we are actually guilty. Okay, so that's why, I mean, your question assumes that this text is a correct reading of what happened.
I understand the text, but I'm talking about Aaron himself. If you're saying that it wasn't the Israelites that really sinned for the golden calf, it was the people that were hangers on.
Right.
And I'm not involving the text at all. Who was ever responding?
No. But then, I mean, the text doesn't say it was the mixed multitude. The biblical text doesn't say that.
But do you believe that the Israelites were part of the?
Absolutely. Absolutely, and I think it undermines. I mean, there's a whole other, and again, a lot of time. There's a whole other reading that says, I mean, because you look like right after the golden calf, we're given all the holidays. Okay, and like Maimonides in general reads all of these rituals, and I do as well, as God's response to a human need. Okay, and I'll wrap up with this. I mean, there's a lot, but I'll wrap up with this, right? God's response to a human need. In other words, God doesn't need any of this stuff. God doesn't need any of this stuff. We need ritual in our lives. And if God doesn't give us ritual, we're going to make up our own. And it's not going to be good. Right? It's not going to be good because, and that's why God gives us rituals. Yeah.
Just real quick to Lloyd's point, I think, whether you believe it's the mixed multitude or Israelites.
Louder.
To which point, whether you believe it's the mixed multitude or the Israelites that were involved in the golden calf, my opinion is Aaron was a pacifist. Was a pacifist. So he might have been afraid that if he takes ownership of it, or if he doesn't respond as the leader of the group, that he's gonna get, the blame is gonna be put on him, he's gonna get stoned or torched or whatever. So he says that to say, hey, don't come at me, I didn't do what the fire did. I asked them to bring their gold, that's on me, but I threw it in the smelter and out came this, so don't come after me because of the cat.
Right, I mean,
To Lloyd's point, I think whoever it is that he's talking to, I think somebody would, either the Israelites would have been mad at him, or the mixed multitude would have been
okay,
mad at him.
that's fair, that's fair. It's not that he's trying to evade responsibility, he's trying to avoid pointing the finger at anybody, right? And there is certainly this idea that Aaron is the lover of peace, right? Haveli Tamidaf Shel Aaron, right? Be of the disciples of Aaron, right? And there are certainly readings that say exactly that Aaron knew that if he didn't make the golden calf, the people would kill him, right? And it's not, and you have to be, I mean, it's really like, it's a very complicated reading, right? Because there are certainly times, I mean, halachically, you are supposed to allow yourself to be killed rather than forced to commit adultery, right? I mean, if the Roman legion walks through that door, right, with a statue of Zeus and says, everybody bow down to Zeus or we're going to kill you, you have to allow yourself to be killed rather than bow down to the statue of Zeus. So why did Aaron? Because Aaron said, better that I should be, commit adultery than all these people should murder me. I don't want them to be guilty of murder. Okay, I'm really trying to wrap up
Just
deep.
a connection to the last comment you said. I always make connections and I can't point to the actual where it's coming from. Way back when, there was a piece that talked about a learned man, rabbi, I guess, and was faced with death for, I think, giving up God, wraps himself in the talus, recites the Shema, and is killed.
Right, it's in the Talmud, we read that in Yom Kippur, part of the martyrology. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's Hanani ben Tradion. All right, wrap up. Shabbat Shalom, folks. Yes.